Hello again, viewers. Jake here with another Reading Too Much Into Things. And to crib off of PBS IdeaChannel style for a bit, here's an idea. Treize Khushrenada from Gundam Wing is secretly a Metal Gear Solid character. Yes, that's right, I'm finally redoing my Gundam Wing Metal Gear Solid episode rant. So, if you've already heard my basis and theory on that and don't want to hear how I've restructured it, or if you really don't care about Metal Gear Solid or Gundam Wing, or if you care about Metal Gear Solid and still want to go in blind about everything concerning it because there are going to be some spoilers, just leave your comments down in the doobly-doo and go about your day. Don't worry. I'll wait. This cup is empty. Oh well. Still wait. So, Treize Khushrenada is a Metal Gear Solid character. Let's actually establish what these two things are, and I think through that we'll see where my argument lays. The Metal Gear Solid franchise, Metal Gear franchise, but let's stick with Metal Gear Solid, is a stealth action video game franchise focusing on espionage, but also on politics, on the nature of war economics, those who participate in war, as well as those who benefit financially from it, as well as giant robots. In the Metal Gear Solid franchise, you play as Snake, technically, because that actually covers 3 or 4 different characters, but that right there is a spoiler and going too far into things. He is given a straightforward mission, seemingly, that turns out to be far more expansive and involve political cover-ups and conspiracies than he intentionally believes. Usually setting it up as a mission against a group of terrorists, it expands eventually to revealing that most of the events that you are up against as Snake or Solid Snake are caused by a group called the Patriots, which are actually self-aware AIs that are trying to control the events of the world, including what wars happen, how many people live or die, what sides win, and all the economics involved in that, and the spreading of news, in order to maintain peace. Originally constructed by a group called the Philosophers, who were set up after World War I in hopes of preventing a world war of that scale to happen again, by culminating money and technology into one place, but things fell apart after World War II, as you do. You, as Snake, while you're against the Patriots' idea that war is an inevitability so we have to control it, are also against Liquid, whose idea is that if we create a constant source of conflict, soldiers will never have to stop being soldiers. You want there to be an end to conflicts. You want there to be a world where if war has to happen, then when the war ends, it can end. Soldiers can give up being soldiers without repercussions, and with a system set up so that other soldiers can give up being soldiers. This continues on into Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, wherein you play former Snake, Raiden, who is now currently a cyborg ninja. It's complicated. In a world that is closer to ours, but more robotic because of technologies that the Patriots were supposedly holding back. This is also a world that's very controlled by the actions of mercenary groups because there's still conflicts in the world. As one person suggests, the Patriots didn't make the war economy, they just manipulated it. You as Raiden are first given a job to protect a upcoming president who is being targeted by much stronger military forces that want to continue a civil war. You're not crazy about that. However, he gets killed by a rival mercenary group, and from there you go on a quest for vengeance. However, it's revealed through your interactions with these mercenaries, the Winds of Destruction, that revenge really isn't what his group's mission statement is. Originally, the idea of Raiden's mercenary group is that they can provide protection and strength to the weak. However, this in turn makes those that he opposes the weak, so who protects them? It's a very complex web of, when using force, you can't claim to stand solely for the weak, because if you're stronger than those you're standing against, they're the weak that you should be protecting. Eventually, these conflicts lead you to finding that, one, this group is kidnapping children and putting their brains into cyberized bodies to make perfect soldiers to perpetuate war at a very low cost. And two, this is being manipulated by a US Senator, Armstrong, who wants to create such a disaster that, one, it will push him to the presidency, but two, as president, he could dismantle democracy as we know it. That we could change the whole world economy and world politics through America, which is still seen as one of the major powers, because Donald Trump hadn't been elected yet, to a hyper Ayn Randian libertarian ideal that the government solely exists to have the title of government. That every single person themselves is actually a nation state on themselves. That the strong will wipe away the weak, and that every man who has the strength and conviction can fight their own war. However, this ideal also includes handing nuclear weapons to every single person on the planet. Not the best idea. You defeat him, but through these interactions with both the Winds of Destruction and the Senator, Raiden comes to understand more of himself as a victim of being raised as a child soldier and having no ideals of his own outside of battle. But that's a different conversation altogether. Let's move on to Mobile Suit Gundam. Mobile Suit Gundam is a long-running anime franchise having to do with giant robots and wars, focusing mostly on the pain that's caused through loss via this war, be it losing loved ones, losing one's own identity, or losing the innocence of childhood by joining armed forces. Most of the conflicts are set up between the Earth sphere, Earth, and the colonies which were originally populated by those on Earth after overpopulation, but have come to see themselves as independent nations. Also,
せっかく減った人口です。これ以上増やさずに有料な人種だけを残す。
聞こう。知っておるか。アドルフ・ヒトラーを。
ヒトラー
but that's a whole other basket of fish. Let's focus on how this ties into Metal Gear Solid. Gundam Wing is one of the first series in the Gundam franchise to take place in an alternate timeline from the standard Gundam series referred to as the Universal Century. Instead of it being set in a traditional style war between the ideals of Earth and how it should be governed and the ideals of the colonies and how they govern, is instead establishing a 1990s idea of a conflict. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, in the early 1990s, a philosopher wrote a book, The End of History and the Last Man, describing how because Western democracy had won against communism in the Cold War, and that these two powers were so dominant in the world conflict, that there would be no other wars after this because there weren't any other real forms of governance that would come from that. And because there was no seeable conflict for first world countries at this time, it was believed that there would be no standard wars anymore, and his whole argument for end of history is that history is defined by him as the constant conflict of different governing ideas in the forms of war. So Gundam Wing finds itself in a post-history timeline, wherein there is not a major armed conflict, at least in the beginning, but there is oppression from the Earth Sphere's militarized branch, Oz, on the colonies, including assassinations of peaceful protesters wanting more anonymity and rights. This leads several doctors, and by doctors I mean they call themselves doctors, they're more professors, to band together and create basically a terrorist cell. Each of them crafting their own giant robot that is stronger than the standard mobile suits, and having as their pilots young boys who, while expertly trained, can be easily replaced if they die, and they still need to terrorize Oz. That's right, Gundam Wing has us following 5 terrorists. So okay, you're fighting against oppressive politics of the Earth Sphere, but it's just one branch. Well, how does this tie into Metal Gear Solid? I'm getting there. One of the major leaders of Oz is one Treize Khushrenada, the focus of our idea, who is a gentleman soldier. He dresses finely, he is never crude or crass like other antagonists. He believes in honorable duels despite the fact that he also okays assassinations. However, through the various conflicts with Oz, with Treize, with the other soldiers of Oz, we learn that Treize is not actually pulling the strings. He's not the mastermind here. That role goes to the mysterious Rummerfeller Foundation, a group of ultra-capitalists who want to use the constant conflicts that are born either through civil wars or the colonies being displeased by their treatment to amass large amounts of wealth by manipulating basically the war economy. And Treize, for the most part, goes with this, although he disagrees strongly with their stances, to the point where eventually the Rummerfeller Foundation puts him under house arrest because he's making too much noise against their plans. One of their major plans is to automate the effects of war by replacing all soldiers with AI-controlled mobile suits called mobile dolls. This, flying in the face of Treize's ideals, is the last straw for him and when he finally rebels against them. Mostly because, as he states near the end, when there is actually the closest thing to an armed conflict between Earth and space, is about how mobile dolls remove the horror of war. He wants there to be horror at the idea that going to war means people will die. If you're automated systems, no one was going to care about going to war because the robots will blow each other up and one side will win and one side will lose. He wants there to always be soldiers who have to die in these wars so that people will not think about going to war because of the terror of losing people, about the terror of dying. And that's why I feel he's secretly a Metal Gear Solid character as opposed to a Gundam character. Because while Gundam wants to focus on the horrors and loss of war, most of it is done through the lens of, aren't these giant robots cool? Which is a problem with a lot of war media, to be fair. Meanwhile, while there are intensely weird, goofy things about the Metal Gear Solid series, not the least bit being cyborg ninjas and psychic children, it's very much about how the scars of war exist past the war. That no matter how cool or awesome the armed conflicts may have been, it has an impact on people. It has an impact on societies. It leaves people broken or unable to move on past being a soldier, and that's terrible. Treize Khushrenada is a kind of bridge between those two ideas. He's all for there being wars, and he's all for cool robots. I mean, he makes one. But he wants there to be wars that have costs. He wants people to remember that every time a war happens, someone loses something. Not to mention how much Treize would actively act against the Patriots, since their idea is dehumanizing the losses that come from war by normalizing the conflicts and controlling the outcomes of the battles. So yeah, that's my whole rant and why I think Treize Kushranada is a Metal Gear Solid character. Now, am I saying one stole from another? No. For one thing, the realization of who the Patriots are and their control over the government weren't introduced till Metal Gear Solid 2, and Gundam Wing came out between Metal Gear Solid 1's release and Metal Gear Solid 2's release. So, I don't think the writers of Gundam Wing were intentionally stealing from Metal Gear Solid franchise. And considering what we've seen of Hideo Kojima's other influences, I don't think he took ideas from the Rummefeller Foundation existing in Gundam Wing. However, I do think both of these ideas, both of these series, probably took parts of the modern philosophy that were being introduced at that time, since 90s, as well as other examinations of history to form these two different ideas and settings. It's also one of the reasons why Gundam Wing has gone from, when I first started getting into Gundam, my favorite show, to, well, it's kind of goofy and silly. Well, I mean, look at that Gundam, it has a scythe, and look at that one, it has a dragon for a hand. How are those terrorists? Back to, wait, no, this is a lot smarter than I gave it credit to, and really, that's the reason why I want to bring this idea up to people. A lot of people I run into dismiss Gundam Wing entirely because of the goofy 90isms that exist from it through the robots, which, I'm sorry, they're coming off of G Gundam, the goofiest Gundam ever, and Japanese shows that go on yearly tend to take a year to process what the previous series had to offer. And don't complain to me about, but the Wing Zero has feather wings. No, shut up, that's the movie. And they intentionally made all of the mobile suits in the movies go to the nth degree. It's still booster wings on the actual show. They don't have feathers. The feathers are stupid. Okay. Normally, if I wanted to end this out as PBS IdeaChannel does, I'd ask, what do you think about this idea? But the whole point of my channel is that I'm probably reading too much into this. Thank you again for watching more Reading Too Much Into Things rants, and hopefully this actually did come up at the right time. And hopefully this won't be taken down by Bandai without telling me. If you thought this idea was interesting and thought people would have input on it that I hadn't considered, share it around, leave your comments down in the doobly-doo. I'm Jake, and as always, stay safe.